Buoys were about 2.4 kilometres from the entrance, of which well over 1 to 1.3 kilometres was fully submerged cave passage, and the rest of it was essentially floodwaters, like an underground river system. And these boys were between 11 and 16 years of age. Initially, we were told that they couldn't even swim. As it turned out, that was misinformation, but that was the information we were working on. And the cave system was fairly challenging. I mean, the floodwaters were strong. The visibility was essentially zero. It was like swimming through coffee. Ben and Rick and John had laid, and some of the Thai Navy SEALs had laid a rope throughout the cave, so they had set that path for us, for those who followed, to follow. But basically it was like swimming with your eyes closed, following a rope through very tightly restricted cave passage. So not really for the faint-hearted, and certainly not certainly a major challenge for young boys who we thought couldn't even swim. So we were faced with this problem. How do we get these kids out? And lots of ideas were being tossed around, of course. You know, could we teach them to dive? Could we leave them there while we wait for the monsoon season to go away? And that was going to take at least 3 to 4 months. But, one by one, all those plans fell away as we realised all those ideas were pretty well hopeless.
And this is one of the moments when they decided to get back in touch with you, because not only are you a cave diver, but you have this quite unique skill set. Because what is your job?
Anaesthesia. So I'm an anaesthetist or anesthesiologist, depending which part of the world you're from, and someone with an interest in cave rescue, particularly through sumps or parts of the cave which are flooded. So yeah, I did feel like this rescue had my name written on it. The more I read and heard about it, I had this strong feeling that I needed to be involved, and I was actually pretty keen to get over there.
They also got in touch and they floated this idea past you. What was that idea that they floated early on?
Well, the idea of sedating or anaesthetising the children to bring them out so that they wouldn't panic, obviously, on the way out was actually raised by Rick Stanton. And it's fair to say that pretty much every clever idea in this rescue was probably some way attached to that man. He's very good at thinking outside the box. And I was exchanging text messages with Rick on one particular morning, and he sent this text saying, "What do you think about sedating the boys?" And you know, as an anaesthetist and a diver, that idea was just preposterous to me. I couldn't think of a surer way to end the lives of these boys in very short order. So my reply to him was, it's just completely out of the question.
Why was it such a bad idea?
I had grave concerns about the safety of sedating, a child and then immersing them in the water. And there are three main
At SPX Robotics, we create
Firstly,
synthetic data
I
for robot
huge
vision.
concerns that the face
We work
mask
with
would
enabled
leak at
robotics.
some stage during their 3-hour exit from the cave. Only a small
Engineers
amount
at
of water in the
Caltech
mask could
have built a robot
potentially
that
drown
combines
them. And if they're
flying-
unconscious, there's no way they can clear that water out themselves. The second thing which, all first aiders get taught is that in an unconscious person, if their head falls forwards or their tongue falls back into their throat,
And
they can very
to create
easily
a new
obstruct
form
their
of
airway.
locomotion.
And knowing that they were being escorted
robot
out of the
is called
cave by
Leonardo,
non-medical
for legs
people with
on
no
board
visibility
drone,
on their
or
patient
Leo
at
for
all,
short.
they could really only just
Leo is a
get
pair
the kid
of multi-joint
underwater.
legs for
The
bipedal
chances
walking,
of their airway
but also
obstructing at
has
some
propeller
point during that
thrusters
3-hour
that make
dive
its
must
walking
be
more
very
stable
high.
and allow it to hop.
And the final
and
thing
jump.
was that when you're anaesthetised, your core
The
temperature
goal
often
of Leo
plummets quite
is to give a
rapidly.
robot unprecedented
And
walking
the
ability,
water temperature
and
was only
also
23
to study
degrees
and
in the
solve
cave,
problems
so
posed
I
by
expected
hybrid
that,
locomotion.
again, over that 3-hour
Leo
period,
is
their
capable
core
of many
temperature
tricks:
would head
tightrope
southwards
walking,
towards 23,
stair
and
flying,
at some stage they
skateboard
would
Leo is
they
helping
would get
engineers
fatal
rethink
hypothermia.
how robots
So,
could move
if
in
the
the future,
first two
and could
problems of the
open up
water and the
difficult
airway didn't kill them,
environments
then
for
surely
robotic
they'd die of the cold
exploration.
itself.
You did offer to go out anyway. What role
So when it
did you
moves,
think you could
it's
say?
changing the route to get
I
between
thought
two
I would
nodes.
just be there in a medical
When it flashes,
role,
it
or
disappears.
just as a normal cave diver to give
then
the
there we
British
are,
guys a bit
that's
of a
it gone.
hand whilst the
And the
rescue
world
was
is free of
effective, but I
Facebook.
didn't really
If a
entertain
tree
the idea
falls-
seriously that I'd be a
If somebody takes a photo of a
So you
tree
got
on
on this
Instagram,
flight to Thailand. You also
Does the
brought
tree
along
exist?
a
Well, no one
friend.
knows because no one's seen the photo.
So
What are they
pretty
gonna be
quickly
saying
decided
in,
that I didn't want to do this
in
by
Silicon
myself, so I
Valley this
dragged a
morning?
mate along.
I'm not sure we can put that on a family-friendly
When you
channel.
arrived at this cave system.
Once upon a time, not so long ago, there was a little website, and its name was Facebook.
Headline news in many, many
and then it
countries.
stopped.
Can you describe the
It
scene?
ceased to
What did
be,
it look
took along Instagram and WhatsApp
Almost
with it.
indescribable for
And
someone like
yeah,
myself who'd
so a
never
bit of excitement
attended
for those network nerds last
massive
night as we
incident like
watched
this before.
Facebook
There was an enormous
disconnect
amount of
from the
interest,
internet.
and it was actually very difficult to even move through the site.
The first thing to say is that Facebook know what they're doing when it comes to networking. They're designing their own gear, they're designing their own switches, their own routers, they're writing their own operating systems on top of Linux to run these things. They're not some fly-by-night operation that don't know what they're doing here. The thing that's probably happened here is that someone's had a bad day at work, they've pushed something up to the servers and to the switches and things, and it just didn't work. And normally when you do that, it's sort of, you get a slight error message. Someone yesterday probably pushed the wrong button and brought down the whole of Zuckerberg's empire. What was interesting about it from a networking point of view is just exactly what happened. This wasn't a case of you couldn't access the website, it wasn't responding, but the computers were still there. Facebook literally managed to disconnect themselves from the internet. The stories coming out from journalists in States and things is that Facebook engineers couldn't get into the building because their cards weren't being swiped, which you can start to understand why that would be the case when you've got such a large network that you're dealing with, and they like to eat their own dog food, and so the whole network is built on top of their own infrastructure. When you get something as catastrophic as this happen, then it's going to be a big problem for them. So the big question then, of course, is what actually happened? I'm using the right BGP replay to look at this. I've pre-recorded it so I can skip through it. If we run back in time, we can get to around 3 o'clock GMT. What we've got here is the network where Facebook's DNS server is. So DNS is the system which takes the name facebook.com and converts it to the IP address that Facebook uses. So lots of mics